and anger over a stagnating economy has sparked protests across Iran. At least 7 people are believed to have been killed in clashes with security forces as the demonstrations continue. This is the worst unrest the country has seen since the 2022 uprising following the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. Meanwhile, in a post on social media, U.S. President Donald Trump has vowed to intervene if any peaceful protesters are violently killed. This has sparked a war of words online as a top Iranian official has hit back, accusing Washington of stoking the tensions. For more on this story, we can bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.
Hi, Catherine.
Now, Douglas, can you remind us what's driving these protests and what demands, if any, the protesters are making?
Yeah, look, the immediate trigger, and you just alluded to it, is the economy, right? Really, the economy, quote, stupid. And what is that? We have had a slide in Iran's currency, the rial, a real dramatic slide, and that in turn has triggered prices which have really soared. They've skyrocketed. Inflation's around 40% right now, and you might say, oh, well, that's not, triple-digit inflation. But Iranians are hit hard for it. And remember, coming in the context of an economy which for now years and years has been struggling, laboring under the weight of Western sanctions, which are yet to be lifted. So all of this together, leads to a big economic headache, a cost of living headache, to appropriate a term now all used across the West, an affordability crisis, but something really on a much larger scale. But economy isn't the only thing. What's interesting is the reports of these protests, which have gone not everywhere in the country, but a lot of places in the central part of Iraq and in cities. They had started in Tehran, obviously, with just shopkeepers. They spread to at least 10 universities throughout the country on this past Tuesday. And they've since popped up in a lot of smaller towns, also in a lot of rural areas. And you've heard some of the people chanting also against the countries. It's an Islamic theocracy, Iran. And they've been chanting against the Ayatollah, the supreme leader. There's no higher leader in Iran, against the clerical theocracy that runs Iran, still with an iron grip. So yes, economic factors are what galvanized or what triggered these protests, but it's also, they have brought to the surface a lot of underlying anxiety among a part of the population and grievance, if you will, against the way in which they are governed by what they see as this sort of all-powerful clerical leadership.
Now, how have the authorities been responding to these latest protests? The president's been a little bit conciliatory, but is that going to calm the waters? Or?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, you say the authorities. Now, let's divide things. The authorities in Iran, as in a lot of places, are not some monolithic lump. There are certain authorities who have one tone and others, namely among the hardline clerics, who have a very different tone. Now, the president, who's seen as more moderate, I have to say, is seen as Pezeshkian, he has tried to calm the tensions and signaled that he would actually like to negotiate with the protesters. He doesn't want to inflame things further. Everyone has fresh memories in the leadership of those 2022 women life liberty protests, as you said, sparked by the death in police custody of a 22-year-old young woman who basically ran afoul of the morality police's version of how you should wear the Islamic headscarf, the hijab. And ever since, those were countrywide mass protests. These are not on the same scale. They are not everywhere in the country, but they are still raising alarm bells in a leadership that still has very sore and fresh memories of those protests relatively recently. So while Pezeshkian has sort of tried to reach out, others aren't necessarily doing that. First, I want you to hear what the president has actually said, taking, as you might say, a more conciliatory tone.
People are dissatisfied. We are at fault. You are at fault. Do not go after America as the one to blame. Do not go after some other person. It is we who must serve, and they must be satisfied with us. It is we who must properly manage our resources. We must find a way to solve the problem. It is we who must make the effort and find solutions.
So look, even as the president seems to trying to calm things, take a more moderate tone, we have seen at these protests reports of live fire being used in a couple of instances against protesters. And we've also heard reports of water cannon being used to disperse protesters. Water cannon at a time when Iran's in the midst of a massive water shortage crisis. So you have, yes, trying to calm tensions, but also a harder liner says we are not going to let anyone exploit their grievances to stoke tensions in the country and risk public law and order as they would see it.
And we saw that Donald Trump has inserted himself into this with his statements on social media. Does he have a strategy here?
As much as he ever has a strategy, when he says something, he often changes on a dime. In this case, yeah, he's injected himself, that's the right word, into this by saying that basically he's ready, if the state violently kills peaceful protesters, as he put it on Truth Social in his post, he's ready to come to their rescue. That's obviously also provoked some exchanges of words. Ali Larijani, who's a former parliamentary speaker, he's now the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, he basically said, Donald Trump, is doing nothing but trying to stoke tensions. Remember, the U.S. Was part of the 12-day war waged with Israel back in June, in which case, at which point the U.S. Launched airstrikes against nuclear installations, other military infrastructure in Iran. Obviously, those memories are still very fresh. And he just met with Netanyahu, and Israel's been suggesting Iran's trying to ramp up its nuclear program again. So it comes in a very, very tense context, and Iranian authorities don't think Trump is doing anyone a service by stepping into what's already a very volatile Mideast situation.